Hello, this is Hilary Robertson. Welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. This time I'm joined by singer Carmela Rappazzo. Her new album, Love and Other Difficulties, is out now. It's a collection of some standards and some original songs. 6 of the originals were composed by Carmela, and 3 were collaborations with pianist and composer Oscar Rossignoli, who I interviewed for episode 69 of Harmonious World. I think you'll enjoy this conversation. Please do let me know what you think, and here we go. Hi, Carmela.
Hi.
Hi, nice to talk to you.
It's nice to speak to you as well.
Let's talk about Love and Other Difficulties.
Okay.
It's a lovely album, and I also like the collection of Rilke poems that you were inspired by.
And you know that. I'm thrilled that you know that.
Yeah. Rilke is one of those poets who not enough people know about. Yeah.
Very true. Well, what poets do people know about any longer?
Well, yes, there is that.
None of them are on TikTok.
We have some really good poets in the UK who I'm not sure they are on TikTok, but they're certainly on Instagram and Twitter and things. So,
oh, that's wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
The world is still civilized.
Yeah. We have a great guy over here called George the Poet. And he's brilliant. And he's a young black guy, and he's so engaging. It's fantastic.
My sister-in-law is a poet, and I had a dear friend who has passed now years ago who was also a poet, and they always have put poetry in front of me because I try to write, and I always end up maybe being too rhymey in my writing, but I try to write non-rhyming ways first to get the ideas together, and they are responsible for that.
All right, that's very good. So what came first? Did the writing of the songs come first, or were you inspired by the poetry first, or how did it happen?
No, the songs came first. This collection of songs, some of them started quite a while ago. Well, quite a while ago, about now a year and a half. One of them even 2 years ago. And the inspiration for me comes from whatever it is that's going on in my life, something that I'm observing. I've always loved Rilke, though, and the title of that book has always sat on one shoulder for me. It's an amazing idea, love and other difficulties. And usually I don't write love songs. I don't know if you're familiar with anything else I've ever put out, but I lean a little more toward unusual, difficult people,
Yeah,
darker ideas. And originally, when I started writing these songs, I was working on a song called I Don't Write Love Songs, which didn't make it onto the record. But I was witnessing a lot of people around me going through difficult periods in their lives, not just pandemic difficulties, but what was happening with their relationships as a result of the pandemic as well. And that's what started the process for me. One in particular, there's a song called Love Tune, and it was actually inspired by someone's very bad relationship that I was observing them not being able to get themselves out of.
Right. I often say to people, I've been on my own for 20 years, and I often say to people that actually it's a lot easier to be on your own. I can decide what I want to do, what I want to eat, where I want to go, when I want to go on holiday. I can decide. I don't have to think about anybody else. And I think sometimes love and other difficulties, absolutely, love can be a difficulty.
Yes. I don't know anyone, and I really think they're in either denial or they're just unwilling to be honest about it. I don't know anyone who has smooth going in a relationship with another person, especially if you're living with someone, if you're under the same roof as someone and you have habits. There are things one does.
Yeah.
With, that have everything to do with one's own mental privacy in a way. And I'm that person. I'm very much often in my own head. And I definitely have habits. And so living with me, I've always said, I'm married. I do live with another musician and we don't work together. Because we had to choose between one or the other. And I've often said when people say to me, oh, you're in a relationship, how does that work? And I say to them, I have no idea. I don't know why he puts up with me and everything that I do. And I don't know why I put up with him. But I do know that we've always tried to live in a space where there's enough room where I don't have to see him and he doesn't have to see me. And that's also how gardening becomes a haven.
Absolutely. Yeah. What I'm interested by, so you worked with Oscar Rossignoli on this.
Yes.
And I interviewed him about a month or so ago. So he's been a guest prior to you. He's amazing pianist. Amazing.
I moved to New Orleans. Now it's about six and a half years ago, maybe a little over 6 years ago. And I'm from New York, but I've lived in other places. I was living in New York when I moved here and very spoiled. I've been very, very spoiled by who over the years, over my lifetime, who I've played with. And when I got here, I was looking for people to, who can I play with in New Orleans? And I literally I went to an art market that was in a park. And here in New Orleans, there's music everywhere. So there will be music on the streets, there's music in the parks, there's music everywhere. It's not just in clubs. I walked into this park and Oscar was playing. And I heard it with my ear first and followed my ear to where I heard the music coming from. And I walked up to Oscar on his break and I said, give me your phone number. And I've been playing with him ever since. He's a joy to play with. He's a joy to work with. I really don't he's a gifted player. And he's got great ideas. I'm so lucky to have him. And to be able to write with him now too. 2 of the songs were composed by him, Heartbeat and Endless Fall were his compositions that I heard him perform, but I kept hearing lyrics in my head. And I asked him if I could write lyrics for them. And then Love Tune, I had written the melody and the lyrics, and he put all the voicings in because he has these great ideas. And he brought the kind of dark element into it that it needed in the voicings. Yeah, right. He's great. He's somebody to keep your eye on.
Yeah, he's a very talented musician, but he was great to interview. He really, it just flowed like this one is. Yes. It was easy. And I have to say they haven't all been as easy as this. So
Interesting.
Yeah. So how did you then choose the standards that you have done? You do Skylark. Not many people have recorded that. I love that song.
It's such a beautiful song. And it was an interesting thing. I have to say, I start when there's I'm really, if you saw my book, my Great American Songbook book of mine with all my charts in it, it's it's behind me. It's ridiculous how many of these standards that I know. But Skylark, I had not explored. And when I pick a new standard to explore, I dive in. I try it many different ways. I look at who wrote it. I look at the artists. I want to know more about the song. And Skylark was about a 1.5 year exploration for me. It was one of a very long, drawn out exploration until I really got to the place where I understood it for its, not its beauty. I've always thought it was beautiful, but its depth. And Johnny Mercer, who wrote the lyrics, is one of my favorite lyricists. So Skylark is also probably in my live gigs here, my most requested. I have to do Skylark at every gig from members of my audience, people who come to see me. They want to hear Skylark. It's not just my favorite tune, it's everyone's favorite tune, it seems. And I think it means something different to everyone too. I when I was singing it, I broke up. I mean, it was the first time I sang it when we were recording it, where I was so moved by it that I had to work to keep it together. And yeah. Flower is a lovesome thing. Billy Strayhorn, I'm so inspired by Billy Strayhorn's writing. To me, there's something that goes up and down my spine when I listen to a Billy Strayhorn composition. And that particular song I hadn't heard. I heard the Ella Fitzgerald version of it, and then I had to hear every version of it. And I fell in love with the song. And it's for those of us who are gardeners.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
A flower is a lovesome thing. You completely understand that song.
Totally.
And so in love, again, another composer that for me is Cole Porter. There's no one like Cole Porter. The suffering of those three composers was intense. They weren't just songwriters. Their lives were so affected personally by what was happening to them, and their love lives were a train wreck. All of those composers had difficult love lives. And so that was part of it. So in Love, for me, is one of the darkest love songs ever written.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's beautiful. Those lyrics, they get right to you. And your version just conveys that angst of being in love.
There's nothing like a tango.
No, that's true. That is true. Yeah. And then the final standard, not composed by you, is Empty Chair by Paul Sanchez, who of course is from New Orleans.
I start to tear up even when you say the title.
I know.
Empty Chair, about so we're not going to have a jazz fest now this year. We didn't have a jazz fest last year. So I think it was a couple of jazz fests ago. Paul Sanchez was the first musician I met in New Orleans. Like I was here a week, and he was the first musician I met, and I knew nothing about him. And I didn't know he was a local hero. I didn't know he was the star that he is. I met him as a very generous and lovely and gifted singer-songwriter. And he invited Oscar and I to play Empty Chair at something that's called a Threadheads gathering. So the Threadheads is a local group here that supports singer-songwriters and original musicians. And Paul was doing a jazz fest concert for the Threadheads. And he invited Oscar and I to do that song. And I had just lost a friend. My best friend had passed from cancer. And so the song had special meaning for me then. But now the song has great meaning for me and for pretty much everyone I know. I don't know anyone in New Orleans. We've had a really rough go who has not lost friends or family members in the last year and a half. And so now Empty Chair, which is, I don't think it was how Paul originally intended the song, but has become a song about the loss of someone close to you in that way where they have passed away. It is another song where people want to hear it. And when I first started performing it, the audience would get so quiet that I was worried. And then I realized after the gigs would be over, because they would come up to me and tell me that it moves me to tears to sing it. It's a very soulful, beautiful song. Beautiful song.
Yeah, it really is. And it isn't performed much. And I wonder if that's because it's too hard. Emotionally, it's too hard.
Yeah, I think that other than Paul, I don't know anyone else who's performing that song.
No.
It is really hard. I sang it the other day at the Jazz Museum, and I didn't have any tissues on the stage.
Oh dear.
And I really needed them.
Yeah.
It really is a moving tribute.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're right that it takes a new resonance, doesn't it, now? Because as you say, we all know someone who has passed in the last 18 months that perhaps might not have done if we'd, done things differently or whatever.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So how was your lockdown? How has it been?
Well, I made a record.
Yeah, you did. You've been very
I made
creative.
a record. I've been working on my piano skills, which are terrible. Even though I have this beautiful piano behind me, and I do touch it every day. When I hear someone like Oscar, I never want to touch a piano again. We had moved the day before lockdown in New Orleans a year and a half ago. We moved into a new house, which had been empty for 14 years. I say this for you. And the garden had been neglected for 14 years. So I was writing music, making a record, and pulling out invasive vines. That's how my lockdown went. On streaming, I learned how to stream.
Well done.
How to do this too. How to Zoom.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Yeah. I know. And this is amazing because Crossover Media, who connected us, they've been amazing, because I was sort of talking about I could maybe do a podcast, and they went, right, okay, this is what you could do this, get this piece of software, get this, do that, and they've been so brilliant. And I would never have been in touch with them and with all of their clients since, if it hadn't been for lockdown. People like you'd have been traveling, you wouldn't have had time. So it has been amazing.
It has connected us
exactly
on a whole other level. And I've met so many more people in other parts of the world than I ever would have. And like this, where it's, although this isn't intimate, it is.
Right, exactly.
Exactly. We've adjusted.
Yeah. And because of this, your music will get to people who otherwise might not have heard you.
That's true.
because people
That's true.
People are saying to me, oh, I had no idea about this person, and now they do, because they've listened to the conversation. So it's great.
I'm so happy to be with you.
I know, it's brilliant. Yeah. So what about the future? What have you got? Have you got gigs lined up? How's it all panning out into the future?
Well, we are open in New Orleans, but not really. There are clubs that are open. As I said, I did the New Orleans Jazz Museum the other day. If you want to catch that stream, you can visit. It would be a wonderful place for you to hear New Orleans style music, New Orleans musicians, because they do a live stream of in one room, and they do a balcony concert as well. So the live stream is a closed room with incredible sound, and the balcony concerts are for the public, where everyone is outdoors. So we did that last week, and I've had a few streaming gigs. I've had a few gigs in smaller clubs where there's only a few people and you have to show proof of vaccination. And I have a few of those coming up. I have one. I did one that I wish you could have been there. It was in a decommissioned church, a decommissioned cathedral. So it was a cathedral with the stained glass and the statuary and this wonderful grand piano, and Oscar and Martin and the acoustics were amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And you could socially distance because it was a cathedral.
Right.
So I have another one of those coming up here in New Orleans, and I have some streaming gigs coming up, but I'm being very careful. We have a lot of stupid people.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of stupid people everywhere, but we see sometimes things, particularly from America, and we wonder what's going on.
Yes, we do too. Every day.
Yeah. Oh dear.
And it was worse.
Yeah. Oh, yes. When I started this, it was a heck of a lot worse. In fact, there's been an amazing piece of journalism about the Afghan crisis and about what's going on there now, which is absolutely tragic. Talking about how Trump left it and what Biden is doing. And it's very interesting to see side by side one president and then the other president, and to see them so different in the way they talk. And yeah, I think we all know where that's going.
Again, I'm an old New Yorker, and 5 years or so ago, well, now it's a little longer, I was on a plane on election night coming from Massachusetts back to New Orleans in complete horror.
Yeah.
How did this happen? I could see it happening. I mean, you can see the divide in the United States. It's so radically divided, and the gasoline that keeps being thrown on that fire all the time, and is a complete embarrassment for most of us.
Yeah. But when you talk about embarrassments, the same year as we had Trump elected, we had Brexit over here, where we left this amazing partnership that we had with the rest of the European Union. And now there are all sorts of restaurants that can't get staff, and stuff deliveries that can't get through, and all sorts of things that we had. Well, some of us thought would probably happen, but
I can't sell. I sell my CDs locally. Every New Orleans musician sells their music through the Louisiana Music Factory, which is a fabulous old school music store down on Frenchman Street. And it's where you go in, there's vinyl, there's CDs, there's all kinds of music magazines. There are actual clerks. You can touch the records.
Wow.
They're playing records in the store. I mean, old school. And they do sell internationally. They have a website, but they can't sell in England.
No.
They can't sell in the UK. And I'm not sure about Amazon and all those other places. I mean, I know I have records there, but I don't bother to look at what's happening, because they don't need my patronage, really. I mean, they're sending rocket ships into space, but Brexit has affected everyone as well. It's terrible for y'all, and it's not great for the rest of us.
No, that's right. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much. It was really, really nice to talk to you, Carmela.
It was so nice to speak to you, Hillary. I'm so grateful to be here with you, and that you took the time out to listen to the record and to speak to me about it. I'm truly grateful to you.
Thank you so much, Carmela. Nice to talk to you.
You as well, Hillary. Be well.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Harmonious World, and I hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Carmela Rappazzo. It was brilliant, and it's lovely to listen to this music, which includes the pianist Oscar Rossignoli, who I interviewed for episode 69 of Harmonious World. At the beginning of this week's episode, you heard Cicadas from Love and Other Difficulties. And now this is Love Tune. Both of these are original compositions. Please do connect with Carmela. The links are in the show notes. If you're enjoying listening to Harmonious World, please do share it with your friends and family. And also, if you can rate and review on whichever podcast platform you are listening to this on, that would be great too. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Harmonious World, and I'll speak to you soon.
Alone I would be fine, know my own mind, not look to you. If I had to.
Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hillary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.